Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the upper East Fork of the Indian River, about 60 miles north of Glen Allen, Alaska. The elevation is moderate and varied, with valley bottoms starting at around 3,500 feet high and peaks soaring to almost 6,000 feet. The climate here is subarctic, with long, cold winters and short, warm summers. Often known as boreal forests, subarctic climates are known for their seasonal beauty and ruggedness. The trees here are diverse, with 3 types of spruce, 2 types of oak, 2 types of maple, and 3 types of pine, birch, poplar, and aspen. The undergrowth is often dense and crowded with alder, lilac, and vine maple pockets, bringing visibility down to only a few feet. Animals here include wood bison, caribou, Dall sheep, with moose meandering the meadows and muskeg. The predators here are a specialized and formidable group. They include wolverines, 5 subspecies of wolf, Canadian lynx, black bears, and grizzly bears. 33-year-old Nicholas Caparis hailed from Nunica in western Michigan. He was an avid outdoorsman, and after a friend moved to Alaska, had a great reason to visit. The friends developed a plan for a moose hunt in September of 2022, but couldn't possibly have anticipated the events that would transpire. On Tuesday, September 6, 2022, the hunting buddies parked their four-wheelers near the upper East Fork of the Indian River. Moose hunting involves a lot of walking and glassing. The huge ungulate antlers can be seen from hundreds of yards away if the sun catches them just right, so using binoculars to find them is a common technique. Keeping an eye on the breeze and where it takes your scent is critical, and being quiet while you stalk is essential. After parking the four-wheelers, Nicholas's friend, whom we'll call Kevin, began walking down a trail to find a place to watch for moose. As Kevin walked silently along the trail, a fickle breeze kicked up and swirled his scent up the hill through the brush. A short distance away, an alert sow grizzly was tending her 3 cubs and picked up his scent. Now here is where I have to ask, what happens when everyone involved does the right thing? A grizzly should run from people whenever possible. People should pack deterrents to ward off an attacking grizzly. But just because everyone involved in a scenario does the right thing, doesn't mean it always ends well. When the sow winded Kevin, she did the best thing a bear can do. She rounded up her cubs and dashed through the brush in a mad attempt to escape. The only problem was she was running directly toward Nicholas. As Nicholas was walking down the trail, he heard loud crashing in the bushes in front of him. Hoping it was a moose, he stared in the direction of the noise. Just a few yards in front of him, a huge sow and her 3 cubs suddenly appeared on the trail. Nicholas yelled out to warn her of his presence, hoping to avoid a confrontation with the massive bear. Before he could react, she turned and raced directly toward him. Nicholas could see the energy transfer through her fur and muscle with each bound she took. Her claws dug into the soil as she stared intensely into his eyes. As she closed in on him, he groped his pockets for his bear spray. When she was about 20 feet from him, he pressed the button, releasing a billowing orange cloud of the irritant, and hoped it would be enough to stop her. Nicholas watched in horror as the sow ran through the cloud, and he screamed for help. He lifted both arms in a subconscious sign of surrender to her power and an inadequate attempt at protecting himself. He hoped she would veer off at the last second, but she didn't. Although he had dispensed his bear spray properly, it didn't take effect on the sow quickly enough to prevent her from attacking him. As soon as she could reach him with her jaws, she clamped down on his hand without slowing down. The force of her movement jerked Nicholas around, and she spun to continue her attack on him. The sow was irate and attacked to protect her cubs from a threat. She punched her canines through his hands, in turn, as he offered each of them to keep her at bay. She swatted him on the shoulder and clamped her jaws onto his shoulder so quickly that he couldn't move before she had done it. In a blindingly fast and violent attack, the sow bit Nicholas several times on each arm, hand, and shoulder. Her attack was only stopped when Kevin suddenly appeared and fired his pistol in her direction. The sow backed up a few steps and glanced around, searching for her cubs. Finding them safe, she turned and disappeared with them into the brush. Kevin ran to Nicholas's side and examined his wounds. Nicholas had no wounds to his head or neck, but the holes all over his arms and hands were seeping large amounts of blood. Now these two men were not ill-prepared to go into the Alaskan backcountry. Kevin knew he needed to get medical help very quickly, or Nicholas might go into shock, or worse, the bear may return. Kevin searched through his backpack and retrieved a satellite-based communications device. Contacting emergency services stimulated Alaska wildlife officers to respond to the crisis. The troopers rounded up a state-owned PA-18 Super Cub airplane and immediately set off, loaded with medical equipment. Upon arrival at the GPS coordinates from Kevin's device, they pulled off a highly technical landing on the ridge just above the moose hunters. The emergency response team made their way down the hill to the hunter's location. After rendering first aid to slow the bleeding from his wounds, they packed him back to the plane and flew toward Glen Allen. Once approaching town, the flight crew landed near a waiting ambulance that had been notified of the attack ahead of time. Upon arriving at the local hospital, the medical team examined numerous puncture wounds on Nicholas's hands, arms, and shoulders. They stitched up the larger wounds and bandaged him all over. There is no source indicating that he received antibiotics or pain medicine, but it is safe to assume that he had significant doses of each. As for the grizzly sow and her cubs, her behavior was deemed defensive by investigators. She didn't stalk Nicholas or try to bury him. She didn't threaten Kevin after he arrived. She simply took her cubs and left after disabling what she thought was a possible threat to her and her cubs. No action was taken against the sow or her cubs following the attack on Nicholas. The state of Alaska is host to 30,400 brown bears and grizzly bears. It accounts for almost 30% of all fatal bear attacks in the United States, and the vast majority of these occurred in the backcountry and to hunters specifically. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. What do you think the cubs learned after witnessing the sow maul Nicholas? What do you do when you do everything right and it still doesn't prevent a bear attack? What could have happened to Nicholas had Kevin not shown up? I will gladly read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Grimes Creek in Boise County, Idaho. I know this location quite well, and live only a few hills over from our attack site. Grimes Creek flows from north to south, where it meets the Boise River flowing into the town of the same name. The elevation here is around 3,700 feet at the valley bottom, but jumps to about 7,000 feet on the peaks surrounding it. The climate here is a semi-arid climate, but you couldn't tell by the lush forests and understories on the northern exposure of the mountains. There are only around 11 inches of rainfall per year here, with hot, dry summers and cold, snowy winters. Pine trees include ponderosa, yellow, and white bark pines, and fir tree species include Douglas, subalpine, and grand fir trees. Spruce trees that are common here are the Engelmann spruce, with willows, shrubs, and grasslands dominating riparian zones around every body of water. Common animals here include mule and white-tailed deer, elk, moose, bighorn sheep, and the occasional antelope in the flat parts. Dominant predators here include bobcats, cougars, coyotes, wolves, and black bears. Grizzly bears don't officially exist here yet, but local hunters maintain they see them every once in a while. About 5 years ago, a sow with 2 cubs was spotted just north of here near Stanley Lake. And where there's a sow and cubs, there's got to be more. Along hillsides dotted with cabins, Grimes Creek isn't exactly what you would consider as prime black bear habitat. There's just too many people. With an abundance of open spaces and forests all around, you would think that bears would avoid areas frequented by people, but this case shows just how tolerant the bears can be of human presence. This area is a favorite for fishermen, ATVers, hikers, and explorers of all types. Every time you head outside here, you run into someone doing something. Cutting firewood, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, snowmobiling, the list is almost endless. Being close to Boise, a small city of about 235,000 people, makes it a convenient getaway for day trippers, so there's always a buzz of activity. On the evening of Sunday, May 28, 2017, 43-year-old Marvin Jennings was planning another bear hunting excursion. He'd spent the last 20 years living in Boise County, and his family relied on his hunting prowess for meat. Marvin had hunted his entire life while growing up in Boise and was a subsistence hunter. A few years back, he'd killed a big black bear that fed his family for a year, supplemented by waterfowl and other big game Marvin was able to kill. As required to hunt bear over bait in Idaho, he'd purchased a couple of bait station tags, which are required to be left at the bait site for proof of hunter identity. Marvin's work as a general contractor honed his organizational skills, which he utilized to plan all of his hunts for months prior. John Pendergraft was a 66-year-old taxicab driver from Linwood, Washington, and Marvin's uncle. He and Marvin had been planning this bear hunt for the last year, and were excited that John might be able to bag his first black bear. Marvin had set up their bear bait about 80 yards from the ground blind from which they would hunt. At about 9 p.m., shooting light was fading, and the men were considering calling it a day when a big black bear ambled out of the bushes near the bait. They watched carefully, reading the bear's body language to glean any information about it that they could pull. Before consuming any bait at the station, the black bear turned toward the men and stared in their direction. It pinned its ears back and chuffed, letting them know it knew they were there and wasn't happy about it. John and Marvin knew they didn't have a lot of time to waste if they were going to get this big fella. John drew a bead on the bear's vitals and let one rip from his hunting rifle. His aim was true, as the bear collapsed and tumbled down the hill 25 yards or so. Marvin knew pursuing this bear in the dark was a no-go. He quickly strided to within 20 yards of where the bear lay and fired 2 shots with his pistol into its head. He had hoped to end any suffering the bear was enduring, but the bear was planning on inflicting a little suffering of its own. Turning to his uncle after firing the 2 shots, Marvin was briefly distracted from the bear. He may have been thinking how to get its carcass out before it was too dark. Either way, when he glanced back, that big old bear was already halfway to him. A brief panic overtook John with what he saw. He mistakenly ejected the clip from the rifle and scrambled to pick it up. In a motion so practiced and perfect, the black bear swiped Marvin's legs out from under him with one paw as it bit onto his left arm at the same time. Scrambling for his sidearm, Marvin screamed, "He's got me! He's got me!" Hearing his nephew screaming for help, John tried to step down the hill, but somehow tripped. Falling onto his face, he could do nothing to stop this bear from savaging Marvin. In the time it took Marvin to do a full clip dump of 15 shots from his pistol, the black bear had tattered his left arm, bitten several holes into his hip and lower back regions, before collapsing. After watching the bear fall, John made his way as quickly as possible to Marvin's side. He looked down at Marvin's arm, and it looked more like a mass of bloody hamburger than a human arm. Marvin wasn't considering waiting for help, though. He hopped onto his quad and drove to the home of a volunteer firefighter friend of his. The man notified authorities of Marvin's bear attack, and a medical helicopter was dispatched from Boise to a nearby spot to pick him up. After the short flight over the mountain to St. Alphonsus Medical Center in downtown Boise, medical staff discovered that one of the black bear's teeth had broken loose during the attack. It had lodged in one of the main blood vessels of Marvin's arm, preventing him from bleeding out. During a critical surgery, a blood vessel was harvested from Marvin's leg and relocated to his shoulder. This restored and maintained blood flow to his hand. Significant nerve damage limited some of the function of his hand, but it still worked, for now. During his 5-day stay in the hospital, Marvin received a letter from someone indicating they wished that bear had killed him, only adding to his misery. Marvin's wife, Jamie, said she reads to her husband to help him sleep now. He still has nightmares of the bear attack. He's most tortured by the memory of the look in the bear's eyes when it had a hold of his arm. Marvin blames himself for the bear attack, stating the only real regret he had about it was not having a bigger sidearm. As for the bear, analysis of it by game wardens showed considerable wear on its teeth, leading them to believe the bear was very old, but was otherwise healthy. John kept the bear's hide and head. He had a taxidermist create a bear rug and encouraged Marvin to stomp on it to relieve some anger. The hunters did utilize the bear's carcass for meat. Because the bear was a very old male, most of its meat was turned into pepperoni and summer sausage, as it wouldn't be fit for steaks or other cuts. Idaho has an estimated population of 30,000 black bears, based on research from the Idaho Fish and Game. Each year, the state issues 30,000 black bear hunting tags, but only 2,000 to 2,800 black bears are harvested. This means that more than 90% of hunters who purchase a black bear tag in Idaho will not end up harvesting a bear. Bait hunters make up 35 to 48% of black bear hunters in Idaho. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Did the bear play dead to draw the hunters closer for an attack? Do you think it was wise for the hunters to shoot the bear after it glanced and chuffed at them? Would Marvin have been killed if he didn't have his sidearm? Would you want to look into the intense, angry eyes of a black bear with your arm in its jaws? I don't even want to see it in my nightmares. I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Smooth Rock Lake in Wabakimi Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada. A huge network of connecting lakes stretches for over 1,500 miles and includes 10,000 lakes. The park covers 3,440 square miles of pristine boreal forest of black spruce, jack pine, quaking aspen, and white birch, with bogs hidden in grasses and brush in the low places. Wabakimi is the second largest park in Ontario and offers 500 campsites, many of which are remote and accessible by canoe or kayak. Designed for wilderness recreation, visitors can get to the entrance by train, float plane, or watercraft. While taking in the scenery, woodland caribou, white-tailed deer, and moose can be seen as you glide across the water. But this is a wild place, and dangerous predators such as wolves and black bears also stalk the shadows. Between April through June, Ontario Provincial Police have received 40 calls from concerned residents reporting bear activity. Near the scattered cabins and resorts, they've been witnessed searching for food in garbage bins and raiding bird feeders. On June 12, 2024, Adam Phipps was waking up in his tent along Smooth Rock Lake. Adam and his family hailed from Brazil, a small town near Terre Haute in western Indiana. He'd been enjoying a canoe trip with his wife Sunny and other family members along the 1,500 miles of canoeing routes. They planned to canoe their way from fishing spot to fishing spot and camp along the lakeshore each night. The lakes offered walleye, northern pike, lake trout, brook trout, and smallmouth bass, and the fishing was world-class. I could find no source indicating that they brought along bear spray or a firearm on their vacation. In the early morning hours, Adam had woken up and decided to step outside to answer the call of nature. The brisk morning air filled his lungs as he stretched in his last efforts to chase sleep from his eyes. Along the banks of the lake stood thick bushes, a little taller than a man, that hid a very dangerous visitor. Unbeknownst to Adam, a large black bear had been ambling along the lake shore, following its nose to inviting and promising scents. It isn't clear if the bear was surprised by Adam's presence or sneaked up on him in a predatory attack. What is known is that the bear closed in on him and began an unrelenting attack. Undoubtedly, Adam screamed and yelled for help as the bear overpowered him. The bear bit his arms in several places in only a few seconds as Adam fought for his life. He scrambled along the shoreline as he fought the bear off in repeated attacks, each one leaving him with additional bite wounds. Each time the bear attacked Adam, he scanned his surroundings in search of a weapon to defend himself, but couldn't find anything adequate. As he broke away from the bear, he realized he was near a boat dock. Adam scrambled down the dock toward a tethered motorboat, hoping it may serve as some sort of respite from the agony. Leaping from the dock onto the bow of the boat, Adam pulled the mooring line from the cleat. Hoping the boat would start, he turned the key to fire it up as the bear lumbered down the dock toward him. Adam gunned the throttle and motored from the dock just in time to call an end to his attack, but his pain and suffering weren't complete yet. Stuck just offshore, Adam yelled to alert fishermen still ashore. There was no way he would return until the bear had fled, and right now, it wasn't going anywhere. The bear stared in Adam's direction as it meandered the shore, as if looking for a way to get to him. The other fishermen in Adam's party, now fully alert to the bear's presence, tried to run it off. They yelled and put on an attempt at intimidating the bear, but it seemed to be hyper-focused on Adam. Following the assembly of a raucous chorus of upset fishermen, the bear decided it had better focus on easier prey. It slinked back into the bushes, leaving the fishing party to reestablish organization from the chaos it had caused. All told, Adam was bleeding and in pain on the motorboat for an hour while he waited for the bear to leave. Emergency response personnel were on their way shortly after the attack by the fishermen, but the remote location required significant travel time to get there. The bear had long departed by the time the Ontario Provincial Police had arrived on the scene. Pulling DNA samples from the bear's saliva left on Adam's clothing allowed the investigators to compile a DNA sequence for comparison to any bear they suspected of the attack. First responders noted that Adam's injuries were serious, but not classified as life-threatening. After Adam was flown to the nearest hospital and endured an emergency surgery in which his injuries were cleaned and sutured closed, his prognosis following the surgery was that he would have little to no long-term problems resulting from his wounds. Sunny, his wife, would likely be a different matter, and her wounds would be more emotional and mental than her husband's. Seeing your spouse being attacked by a powerful animal tends to do that to a person. As for a bear, there is no source indicating it was ever found, so no action could be taken against it. No source stated how the wildlife officers categorized this attack as either defensive or predatory. Ontario Province hosts as many as 105,000 black bears and has had 38 attacks by wildlife, with black bears making up the vast majority of those. There have been a total of 6 fatal bear attacks in Ontario since 1784, and all of them by black bears. After reviewing the facts surrounding this attack, I'm left with a few questions for you. Did Adam and the bear run into each other, or was this attack predatory in nature? What would have happened if Adam had played dead, as opposed to fighting the bear? Was the bear habituated to human sources of food, given it showed up near a commonly used boat dock? The next time you go fishing, are you going to look over your shoulder, just in case? I know I will. I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.